Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. In some of my previous reviews of Disney Plus shows, I talked about my gripes with the platform's TV formula. Specifically, I've gone into detail into how short the seasons are and why I think it crutches these shows from the start. Now, I tried explaining this in my Acolyte review, but given the subject material, I don't think a lot of people were too keen on hearing my point of view.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Idiot sandwich what?
An idiot sandwich, Chef Ramsay.
In today's episode, I'm going to go further into why I felt dissatisfied, not just with a lot of these new shows on Disney Plus, but the modern streaming formula in general. I think it'll be harder for younger people to understand some of my points, given we have a lot more time to consume media, but hopefully I can express my thoughts properly, especially as it comes to how I believe the modern streaming environment overall hurts newer creators. Before I begin, I want to tell you all about Captain Midnight's channel. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you check out his content. He demonstrates the problems with the modern streaming landscape in a carefully crafted way, especially when it comes to the business side of things. I've put some links in the description to his videos. Because regardless of your thoughts on these types of shows, from a business perspective, a lot of these streaming services are struggling. They're not capturing new audiences, and it really shows with the amount of money they lose from these services every year. And look, I'm not here to change your opinion on any specific show. While I will be very critical of a couple shows, my main problem is how the overall system facilitates generally lackluster content. So my problem with modern TV is that it generally treats shows like long movies, not actual television. This often means seasons have 6 to 10 episodes with varying episode lengths. In this system, you either get a project that feels like a bloated movie or a series cut way too short. Now, I need to make a clarification here. In this video, I'll be discussing serialized shows, not episodic ones. What's the difference, you may ask? In an episodic show, each episode is completely self-contained. There's usually no continuation to that story, and if there is, it's not super vital to understanding what's going on in future episodes. Think SpongeBob or Phineas and Ferb. With serialized TV, you get one consistent narrative throughout a season. You can't just skip episodes because each one generally has something extremely important to the story. Think Daredevil or Andor. I think the best shows are a mix of the two. Person of Interest and The Mandalorian are some of my favorite shows. But I'm getting off topic here. The most prevalent comments I got in my Acolyte review said that the quote-unquote short runtime isn't an excuse for the show's bad writing. Plenty of great movies have much shorter runtimes and their writing was much better. And you know what? Yeah, those movies probably did have better writing. But here's the thing. A movie and a TV show aren't comparable. It's hard to compare the writing in a movie to that in a TV show because you have two completely different writing and pacing styles. It's like me trying to compare a book with a comic run. Now, at face value, that probably doesn't make much sense. Even the shorter shows on Disney Plus have hours and hours of runtime, much longer than any movie. Any show, no matter how short, with at least a decent writer, has to make for a good series, right? Well, not really. Here, let me illustrate my problem with some visuals. Let's say you have a season that consists of 8 episodes. Unlike a movie that only has to deal with one story and pace, you're splitting up a story into 8 different parts. You basically end up having to make 8 separate stories in order to pace out these shows. Otherwise, it would just be released as a 480-minute movie. I think people assume that because you have more runtime overall, you have more time to develop your story. But that's not necessarily true. The live action Avatar show proves that, which, we'll get back to that later. Each story, aka each individual episode, has to be satisfying on its own for me to continue watching, even if it's part of a wider narrative. That individual story has to have something of substance for me to care about what'll come later, or else the show will have lost my interest. It isn't about how fast paced it is, or cool action sequences, or wanting everything answered immediately. It's about me caring for the characters in every moment of the show. It's about the journey, not the destination. I do not care how good the payoff is. I do not want to waste my time on something I find boring or annoying when I could be doing plenty of other things. At least with a movie, I know it'll be done relatively soon. But going into a show, I have to devote a lot more time into it. I'd much rather watch the Battleship movie than the Halo show because, at least with the movie, I'd only be losing brain cells for like 2 hours. In the Halo show, I'd be losing 9 hours of my life. And that's season 1 alone.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
So, a TV series inherently needs to have a different approach than a movie because every individual episode needs to be somewhat self-sustainable in order for me to feel satisfied and continue watching. This is especially important when ending an episode because if the last scene feels too jarring or unnecessary, my interest in the show is going to go down. It happened to me with The Acolyte and The Book of Boba Fett. The PTSD from some of those endings are real, okay? I think that's why traditional episodic shows like Law and Order or The Office did so well, because every episode has something fresh to offer. Each episode has a carefully crafted story and it's done so well that I want to continue watching after. Why? Because the core reason people continue to watch a show isn't because of the plot or the world building. It's the characters. With cable, they could never ensure I would return to watch the following week, so the writers utilized the time they had in order to make me connect with the characters. In doing so, they make me want to see their future adventures. That's not always the case in a serialized show for me, because streamers are relying on you either binge watching a show or being invested enough in a fandom to continue a show to the end. But unfortunately, this model often results in shows that feel mid at best and downright terrible at worst. Now, generally there's two different sort of models that modern streamers use. You'll either get short episode lengths of 30 to 45 minutes or much longer episodes that average an hour, maybe sometimes even an hour and 15 minutes. Let's analyze these two different methods. Exhibit A, short season, short episodes. I assume a lot of writers go into these shows thinking they have a lot of time, when in reality, they don't. The reason this is clear is because there are often way too many characters or plot lines inserted into these shows. If we take Loki Season 1 as an example, the show is almost formatted like a long movie. So there really isn't a focus in these episodes other than furthering the plot, because the main focus is uncovering the mystery of the TVA. Now, on paper, that's fine. But when you have to deal with the pacing of programs on Disney Plus, the shows end up turning into exposition dumps or a speedrun. We can't focus on Loki's journey because we need time to delve into Sylvie's backstory, figuring out what's up with Kang, and showing us the intricacies of how the TVA functions. So we end up speedrunning most of Loki's character arc in one scene. We can't focus too much on seeing the TVA operate in the field because we need time to explain Sylvie's worldview, give logical exposition on how everything works, and see Loki and Mobius investigate the whole situation. So instead, we get a video explaining what the TVA does in the beginning of the show, instead of experiencing what they do on a daily basis through the eyes of Loki. When it's revealed the TVA is pretty sus, I didn't really care because I was never offered the opportunity to see it through the lens of Loki or someone else working there, not really even Mobius. If the show was longer, there would have been enough time to spread these things out throughout the season. But because there are so few good character or world building scenes in such short episodes, I never really care for anything going on. Yeah, every once in a while I get a nice character moment or action sequence, but any deeper exploration of the themes or the world gets pushed to the side because the show needs to focus on getting to the end of its story. Let's pair this with Legends of Tomorrow Season 2. You have a very similar premise with our characters trying to stop time variance from ruining the timeline and dealing with a character who wants to change the status quo of how that timeline functions. There's a lot of characters and plot lines going on, but the show is effectively able to handle them all because it's spread out over 17 episodes, and every one of them is able to focus on a specific angle. Episode 2's story is set in World War II, and the heroes are trying to stop the Nazis from becoming super soldiers.
Actually, I believe that's my line.
But the focus is Nate dealing with his troubled family history as he connects with his grandfather. Episode 5's story is set during the Cold War and trying to stop a nuclear fallout. But probably the main focus of that episode is Sarah learning to control her emotions as she faces her sister's murderer. Episode 10 actually revolves around the main villains trying to work out their differences, and it's really fun seeing all of their interactions. Each episode's conflict is a device in which we get to explore the characters. Now, I'm not going to argue this is like a perfect show, and the episodes are a little bit more complex than I'm kind of explaining here, but to me, the season is really satisfying because it allowed time for each of these characters to grow without having to over-explain things or rush through important moments just to hurry through the runtime.
Not that guy. These guys!
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
In season 3, we get introduced to the Time Bureau, which is pretty much just the TVA. But instead of a video explaining the entirety of the Bureau's actions, we actually see what the Time Bureau is like through their interactions with the legends. Not only does this explain what they do organically, but we get to understand our characters' motivations based on their thoughts and actions against the Bureau. Unlike Sylvie, who just talks to Loki for an episode about why she doesn't like the TVA. That kind of writing doesn't make me care about the conflict. For a show surrounding Loki and time travel, we don't really explore that many time periods or wacky things. Most of the scenes take place in offices. They're mostly dialogue sequences that are meant for exposition or adding surface level mystery. And it's because if we were to visit more time periods, they'd have to explain what's going on, their purpose for being there, and it would take away from the overall story about the TVA.
Hey, funny guy! I got a joke for you! What smells rotten and puts people to sleep?
Noxious gas?
No! Your act!
So you end up with the show trying to do way too much in too little time. The result is you don't feel satisfied with any of the show because there wasn't a singular focus. Every quote-unquote payoff feels extremely contrived and poorly executed.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
This is a load of barnacles.
These shows often tell me why characters feel a certain way, but they rarely show me. Because there's so many characters and plot lines being juggled around, there isn't a whole lot of time to slow things down and reflect on what's happening. You get a few good character moments sprinkled throughout these shows. I'm assuming because the writers think one character moment per episode is enough to make me care, but they're so far and few between that I can never truly connect with them on a deeper level. And this is something I've seen with a lot of these newer shows. Ms. Marvel, Knuckles, The Acolyte, Percy Jackson. There's way too much going on, so I never end up caring about any of it. I mean, we get the entirety of Knuckles' backstory in a musical montage.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
A Knuckles flashback could have been the coolest part of the show. But because of the short runtime, I had to skip past that in order to finish the episode at its prescribed checkpoint. Throughout The Acolyte, I was constantly worrying about things making sense in the end, hoping the canon breaks wouldn't be too bad. But that's not how I should watch a show. In a mystery, I should be excited to see the final reveal with the trust the show has gained from me, not constantly worrying about if the final reveal will even work. Okay, so shorter episodes just aren't cutting it. There's too much being done in too little time and paced in a way where really good scenes are spread out too thin. It just feels rushed. All of this means really long episodes are the way to go, right? Those shows are much better written than whatever bland content we're getting on Disney+. Well, Exhibit B, short season, long episodes. While shows with episodes an hour or more are generally much better written, I conversely have the opposite problem with them. These shows will normally be a minimum of an hour every episode. The long runtimes end up making many of these shows feeling way too stretched out. There are no restrictions from commercials or a scheduled program, so take as much time as you want on a scene or a side plot. I mean, the episode has plenty of time to do that, but now the problem is you're too heavily emphasizing characters, to the point where it often feels like nothing is happening. Let's look at Stranger Things Season 4. The average episode length is about an hour and 15 minutes. Now, sure, the show is well written overall. Season 4 is actually my second favorite season. But if we're keeping it a $1.50, there's a lot of really unnecessary stuff I just didn't care for. Like, the entire Soviet plotline wasn't that interesting, even if that final fight was pretty cool. In the first 2 episodes, we see a lot of scenes where Elle is struggling to live a normal life and is constantly being bullied. While those scenes were sad, I ultimately never cared about that storyline because I knew she would quickly return with everyone to stop Vecna. I wanted to skip those scenes because it was quite predictable where it was all going. Argyle just felt like a completely unnecessary character who added nothing to the show. Not even humor. I didn't find him that funny. And looking back, it just seems like the only reason Eddie's character was introduced was because the writers didn't have the guts to kill off any other character. Rest in peace to my boy, but ultimately he added to an already bloated cast. While all of these things might have been important late into the season, it always felt like there could have been a more streamlined version of the story. Did we really need to follow 4 different storylines with 19 different characters? It just makes things feel convoluted at times and makes scenes drag on way longer than they need to because they need to take time for character development.
Come on. Move it! Could you be any slower? And you've had your blinker on for the last 5 blocks.
If the season was stretched out for 15 to 20 episodes, I think the story would have felt much more streamlined and seemingly less time consuming. Oh, and remove the Soviet storyline. Hopper either should have died in season 3 or just been inserted to another arc. I mean, at least it wasn't as bad as season 3. Per recommendation, I literally skipped the first 3 episodes, and I didn't feel like I missed a thing. The most egregious part of season 4 was the finale. It was 2 hours and 20 minutes. Bro, what? That's about as long as Avengers Infinity War. My guy, I don't have time to be watching an episode that long. Now I know some of you might say I should just pause the episode and get back to it later, right? Well, the first problem with that is I don't want to leave to do something else when I'm already invested in what's going on. Because when I inevitably go back to where I paused, I'm going to forget the stuff from earlier that I'm supposed to remember. I just spent time doing something probably more important. There's no way I'm going to retain all that information afterwards. But the bigger issue is how I, and probably most people, watch entertainment. The great thing about movies is that you get to be with those you really enjoy spending time with. You spend a few hours with friends or family. Discussing the movie afterwards is so much fun. With the show, people are going in with the mindset that you'll be spending lots of time with it, and with so many different tastes, this usually means you'll watch the show on your own time. When is the perfect time to watch it? Meal times. There's a reason YouTube has become synonymous with it. Because while you're taking a quick break from work, or you want to turn your brain off before you go to bed, videos or episodes going from 20 to 45 minutes offers the perfect amount of escapism without having to worry about wasting time. And I honestly think this is how most people operate. Movies are like a mini vacation people take every once in a while, whereas TV is something they engage with during meals or breaks. Stranger Things may have been written well, but had I not already seen the first 3 seasons, I probably wouldn't have watched season 4. The show really shined when it dealt with Max's story and Elle's time with Dr. Brenner. But I won't go back and revisit those episodes because the episodes are just way too long. I'm going to feel like I'm wasting time again. This is pretty anecdotal, but my mom was watching Unauthorized Living on Netflix. It's actually really well made with a really interesting story and cast of characters. But like Stranger Things, the episodes can reach up to an hour and a half. She skipped the entirety of season 2 to see what happens in the finale, all because the episodes were too long. She's got way too much on her plate to be wasting hours upon hours of her life on this show. It's kind of telling when you're skipping entire seasons of a show just to see how it ends. That's really not how you should be watching something. And that's how I feel about a lot of these newer shows. The Boys, The Last of Us, and House of the Dragon are some good examples of shows I've kind of just stopped watching because I was getting too tired with the runtime. Again, it's not to say these shows are bad, but To me, it's what makes the difference between an okay show and a great one. Exhibit C, The Last Airbender Dilemma. Now, I gotta put a disclaimer. I did not watch the live action Avatar remake. That's for a completely unrelated reason, which maybe I'll make a video on at some point. So if you don't want to hear my take on the show because I didn't watch it, I totally get that. But I've seen a lot of reviews and I think I can pinpoint why the show felt like a mixed bag for many people. So a common complaint I've heard about the show is that the characters don't live up to what they were in the original. And it's not just a nostalgia thing or because of the transition to live action. It's because the show just doesn't entirely get the points of the characters.
Netflix Aang don't got a whimsical bone in his body. He is extremely serious and solely focused on getting from point A to point B. He's not written like a child. He's already the season 3 version of Aang. Netflix, if you want your characters to be able to grow, they need to have a place to grow from.
And why this decision is especially so egregious is because Katara was the glue that held everyone together in the gang that you follow throughout the show. So if her character is underdeveloped, the entire gang is going to suffer because of it. She's literally the reason how the gang even formed in the first place. And by taking that away from her, it makes her such a passive character.
You know how they made this hoopla about this show needs to be accessible to even a mature audience? They said that the cartoon was kind of just aimed at kids and this needs to be like appealing to Game of Thrones fans or whatever. It's really ironic that that was the statement they made because now that the show's actually out, what they really did is they took the cartoon and dumbed it down. So any subtlety that existed in the Avatar cartoon series is now just beaten to death in the live action. They just explicitly state every character emotion ever because they don't trust the audience to be smart enough to pick up on it.
I could go on and on about all the problems with the show's writing, but the main issue I see is that everything from the original season 1 had to be truncated into 8 episodes. This is where we go back to my point about how the total runtime doesn't matter. Let's look at the rundown. The Netflix Avatar show has 8 episodes with an average of like 50 minutes per episode. Adding all the numbers, it made for a total runtime of 437 minutes. The first season of the original show has 20 episodes, 23 minutes each. That makes for a total of 460 minutes. For the sake of this argument, I'm going to remove The Great Divide since that episode added literally nothing to the show.
Let's keep flying.
Now, each season has the same runtime. The Netflix version should be pretty similar in quality, right? Since both have the same amount of time to delve into their characters. So why does it feel like there are entire character arcs missing and comically bad exposition dumps? It's because in the original, everything was spread out over 20 episodes. You essentially have 20 different stories propelling the narrative, and it's through the plot of each episode you really get to connect with these characters. Much like Legends of Tomorrow, you get entire episodes dedicated to a character or a relationship. For example, in the original, there's an episode about Katara finding a waterbending scroll. Throughout the season, she's been struggling to waterbend properly, worsened by the fact it comes so easy to Aang. So when she comes across a scroll that might help her, the team fights pirates and the Fire Nation to obtain it. This shows us what lengths Katara will go to master waterbending. The episode's main focus is on developing Katara's character. This arc is propelled even further in The Waterbending Master. Katara and Aang want to find someone who will teach them the ways of waterbending. You know, the entire reason they go to the Northern Tribe in the first place. When they meet Pakku and realizes he's being sexist towards Katara, she forces him to fight her, even though she knows she won't win. The battle is so satisfying, not because Katara physically manages through Pakku's attacks, as the Netflix version implies, but because she's able to prove to him she's worthy of being his apprentice. The victory is earned because we've seen her struggle throughout the season. And it isn't just her waterbending skills that make her worthy. It's her compassion and confidence in doing the right thing. In the Netflix version, all of that gets tossed. She's given the scroll in episode 1 and all of her skill is just handed to her. The entire reason for going to the Northern Tribe is changed from Aang and Katara's wish of mastering waterbending to some random vision Aang receives. So Katara's fights against Zuko and Pakku don't entirely feel earned because it's just another girl boss moment in the show, rather than a scene where Katara rises up against seemingly insurmountable odds.
You found a master, haven't you?
Yes. You're looking at her.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It takes away her agency. But this all goes to my original point. What time was there to properly delve into Katara's character in the Netflix adaptation? You can't have an episode like the waterbending scroll because now you're wasting time and jumbling the story. Each episode needs to have some centralized story going on, or else things are going to feel unfocused and all over the place. Which means the focus on these episodes will inevitably be to further the plot, instead of focusing on the characters. That's why they combined episodes from the OG and left out character arcs. You can't just have Aang going on random side quests. You can't have an entire episode dedicated to Sokka learning how to treat women better. You can't have episodes like the Northern Air Temple that are much more about world building and character growth. Because if you do, the show is going to feel unfocused, jumbled, and ultimately too short. The Tales of Ba Sing Se is one of the best episodes of the series. But it's not going to work in this 8-episode format because the episode is 100% character focused and literally cut up into pieces. Adding it in means you now only have 7 episodes to get through the entire plot of season 2. And even if they inserted parts of the wider narrative into this Ba Sing Se episode, or vice versa, it's going to be extremely messy. So now we're potentially missing out on one of the best scenes of the show because it'll take time away from the plot it needs to get through. And that's really a shame. Exhibit D, short-term success, long-term failure. Now sure, you might be asking, who cares? All this is just talking points from a random guy on the internet. After all, people's thoughts on TV shows are subjective, right? These companies are making a quick buck from all these shows anyways. Well, true, but my biggest problems extend beyond my personal enjoyment of these shows. The reason streaming services favor this short season format is because the goal is to cut costs and generate profit. By doing this, it's completely ruining the potential for creativity to flourish. What do I mean by that? In the Netflix model, a service will pump out as many shows as possible to binge. This is in the hopes any one of these will become a culture zeitgeist. If a show doesn't become an instant cultural hit, it's now deemed as unworthy of Netflix's money and it gets tossed. How many potentially great shows have been cancelled after one season, even with great reviews? How many great ideas have been cut because Netflix didn't allow these stories to be properly fleshed out? Netflix gets their quick buck and they move on. The Disney Plus model is arguably worse because episodes are released weekly in order for you to keep your subscription for longer. A show has to be pretty quick so the marketing and service can move on to the next show, hoping any one of them might become the next Mandalorian. Let's look at Marvel's Phase 4 schedule. No show went on for more than 2 months. While WandaVision and Loki were successful, almost every other series has been viewed with apathy or hatred. And it sucks because shows like Knuckles and Miss Marvel actually have a lot of creativity in them. You can really tell the creators are passionate about these projects. But, like the majority of these new shows, there isn't enough time or budget to let these creators' ideas flourish. So, with both of these models, it seems like the only way a show will be successful or even greenlit is by being associated with a big IP. It monopolizes the type of content being produced and it chokes on artists' creativity, which is especially bad for newer creators wanting to get into the industry. In trying to cut costs and raise profits, many of these services are actually losing money because, as Captain Midnight explains in his videos, they continue to dump millions of dollars into TV shows that audiences are slowly steering away from. For every successful show like Arcane, you get 10 shows like She-Hulk or Rings of Power that never get much attention outside those fan bases, get absolutely hated on, or seem to struggle even breaking even, if they're continued at all. A lot of these shows aren't complete dog water, and there's certainly lessons we can learn from how cable handled television. We don't need 22 episodes a season because you'll often get a lot of filler, but a nice 12 to 15 episodes with 45 minutes apiece will allow the story to flow well. Some of my favorite shows are in this format: Andor, Stargirl, Daredevil, If you want to tell a tighter story, don't turn it into a miniseries. Just make it a movie. If you want to do something fully serialized, make the actual season a bit longer. That way, the pacing and writing for all these shows feels fresh and organic, rather than something that feels bloated, rushed, or takes too much time.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
But what are your thoughts? Am I onto something here, or am I thinking way too much about all this? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.